Hi, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the growing session that we did last time and that those things that you've planted are starting to sprout and you're starting to be able to see them grow. In today's session, we're going to start looking at lunch boxes. So you should have already started to look at this in terms of what's healthy and what's not, and if your lunch that you're packing each day is a healthy, balanced meal. So looking at your portion sizes, making sure that you've included all your different food groups. In this session and the next session, we're going to give you some good ideas of different things that you might want to include in your packed lunches or in a lunch that you'd make at home during the holidays or something you might take on a picnic. So today's session is going to be all about rhubarb and custard, and we're also going to have a look at overnight oats. And then in the next session that follows on from this, we'll have a look at making our own granola bars, cereal bars and flapjacks. So let's have a look to see what we're going to need for today's session. Don't forget, tie back your hair, wash your hands, make sure you've got nothing hanging over, and remove all your jewellery before you get started. The equipment you're going to need for your rhubarb crunch is a baking tray, a knife, a spoon, and if you haven't got a tablespoon measure, a tablespoon, so that's bigger than your normal spoon, and then some jars to put them in, or a cup, or some small bowls. You're also going to need your chopping board to cut on. So let's move all our bits out of the way and show you what ingredients you're going to need. So you're going to need some jumbo oats, so you're going to need about 50 grams of those. You're going to need some sugar. We won't need very much sugar, we're just going to use that to sprinkle onto our rhubarb. That will just bring out its sweetness. We're going to need some honey again. And then that is pretty much it. We are obviously going to need our custard to be able to pull that together. So what we're going to do is going to make our rhubarb and our custard and our granola, and then we're going to pop them together. So the rhubarb that I'm using today is fresh. I have just picked this from my garden, but you can buy it in your supermarkets. Some rhubarb isn't always red. It depends on the variety, so use whichever one that you can get hold of. Make sure you wash your rhubarb before you use it, and let's get started. So let's move all these ingredients to the side. The first thing we're going to need is our rhubarb, and what we're going to want to make sure we do once we've washed it is remove any leaves that are still on there. If you've brought it from the supermarket and that's already been done, that's fine. Get rid of all of those. Okey-doke. Right. So we're going to take our knife again and we're going to use our chopping board. And I'm going to cut these bottom bits off because we don't want to eat those where they've come out of the plant. And to do that, I'm going to use my claw grip, and then I'm just going to cut the ends off. Make sure you've got your bowl for your food waste. Hopefully you've remembered that now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do the same with the top ends where the leaves were, just to take those little bits off there. In my bowl. Just get rid of that end and that end, and then the same with this one. Okie doke. So if you're picking it from fresh, if you can see a hole in the middle, that means it's gone to seed, and that means you can't use that anymore. That is not edible. So all the goodness of that rhubarb has gone. But if you can see that the ends are complete like that, then that's good to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to chop it up very roughly. So when I say roughly, we're just going to put it into chunks. Now, depending on the size of your jar or bowl or cup that you're going to put it in, depends on what size you want your chunks to be. So you don't want them to be too big, that they don't fit inside. So some of these may be a little bit too long. I'm just going to chop those up a bit more. But this is all personal choice. And equally it depends whether you like rhubarb or not. Now if you don't like rhubarb, then you can substitute it. You could use something like apple that bakes really nicely. And instead of sugar, you can use things like cinnamon or ginger. So I'm just going to keep chopping those into sections. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing them all together, then you can just do them one at a time, like that. If you struggle with your claw grip or it moves around a lot, then substitute it for your fork hold. That will work just the same. So once you've chopped those down like that, then you're going to get your baking tray, and what you're going to want to do is sprinkle them all over your baking tray. Now you want them so that they are on a baking tray where they're not doubled up, so make sure they're nicely even and they're not on top of each other, because you want to we're going to need to cook them, and we want to cook them evenly. We don't want to have ones that are at the bottom that are still raw. Okay, so once we've got our rhubarb on our tray, what we're going to do is we're just going to sprinkle that with some sugar, and that's just going to bring that sweetness out of our rhubarb. There we go, we don't want too much on there. There we go, so just a little pinch. And we're going to put that in the oven. So our oven needs to be preheated to 150 degrees. And then we're going to bake that for around 15 to 20 minutes until tender. And then once we take it out of the oven, we're going to need to make sure that it's cool before we use it in the next step. So let's just pop that in the oven now. So while that is cooking, what we can do is we can start to sort out our granola. So in our next session, you'll be looking at how to make your own granola bars, and it's exactly the same as that if you've done that one already. So what we need to do is we need to get our oats, and we need to get our honey, and we need to put into there whatever we want to. So you can use dried fruit if you'd like. So here's some dried fruit we'll be using later in the granola bars. So we've got dried apricots, blueberries and cranberries in there. You can use nuts, so something a little bit different. Now, obviously, there are lots of people out there that have nut allergies and can't have nuts, and there are schools that don't allow nuts in them. So make sure that you do check that first and that you don't put them in and then take them to school. So what I'm going to do with this one this time is I'm going to add my flaked almonds to this. So I've got my oats here, and then I'm just going to take a pinch full and I'm just going to sprinkle those over the top. Just going to give that a little mix. And then I'm going to put my honey into here. So I have got a measuring cup. You can use a spoon, you can use a spoon measure. So we're going to use a tablespoon, and that's around about 15 millilitres of honey. And we're just going to sprinkle that into there like that. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to put that on a baking tray, and we're going to bake that for about the same time as our rhubarb. And then what we're going to make sure we do is we're going to make sure everything's cooled down before we use it. So that's just toasting our oats and our almonds, and that just gives it a little bit of a different flavour. If you don't want to cook them, you don't need to. You can just add these as they are. It just gives a whole different texture to them. So we've mixed that up like that. go. So if you're going to use them as they are, you can just leave them and wait for your rhubarb to cook and then take them out. I'm just going to scrape all that off there, make sure I use all of it. Okay, if you are going to toast them, then you need to get your tray. So you need to get your tray, and then you need to just put it onto some grease-proof paper. That just helps to get it off, so you don't need a lot of this. So let's just rip that off and just pop that there, and then just spoon that all out on top. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we toast all of it. So I'm just going to spread it out like that. It's all looking very pale at the moment, but obviously when that's toasted, then that will be a bit darker. So we're going to toast that until it's a light golden brown colour. So let's see what happens when we take everything out of the oven. Welcome back. So now our rhubarb is completely cooked in our oven, and so has our granola. I've left it to completely cool, so now we can start to assemble our rhubarb crunch. Let's just put those to one side. Again, you can use a glass jar or a lunch pot, whatever you want to use. Or if it's something you're going to eat straight away, you could use some small bowls and serve it up. If you want to use extra ingredients or flavours to add to your layers, then you can do this as well. So what we need is a spoon to start to spoon all of our ingredients together. Now the custard I'm going to be using today is fat-free instant custard, so it comes from a jar or a carton. It is not any different in terms of costs to those that you can make yourself, just personal preference, or depends on what time you have to put this together. The first things we're going to put into our jar is some of our beautiful rhubarb. So we're just going to layer that up at the bottom. You could flavour your rhubarb with a little bit of ginger or cinnamon just to give it a different flavour. Then we're going to spoon in some of our custard. I'm using a teaspoon as the top of my jar isn't very big, but if you have a bigger jar or pot, you can use a bigger spoon, whatever you've got to hand. Then I'm going to take some of the crunch granola and I'm just going to sprinkle that on top. You can layer it up however you like. So I'm going to add some more rhubarb. I'm going to add some more custard. As all the ingredients are cold, this is a really good one for lunch. There's nothing here that has to be kept hot or needs to be warmed up. Obviously, if you want to eat it warm, then you can do that as well. So it makes a really good healthy dessert after a meal. There you go. And then we have our layered pot, if you can see that. You can keep this in the fridge and then eat it within 2 days of making it. You won't want to keep it for too long as all the ingredients are fresh. But you can keep it overnight, so you could have one on the day and then one the following day. That would be absolutely fine. Right, so now that we've made our rhubarb and custard crunch, if you're not a custard fan or a rhubarb fan, you might like our overnight oats instead. So we're going to show you how to make those as well. And then you can maybe do some taste testing and test your recipes out on your family and friends and see which one gets the votes. So for this one, we are going to use porridge oats. We're going to use fat-free yoghurt. And then it's entirely up to you how you make up the rest of your overnight oats. So you can use a mixture of fresh fruit and dried fruit. You can use nuts. So there's a whole range of different things that you can use. I'm not going to use dried fruit in this recipe today because we use that in our granola. So I'm going to take that away. I am going to use nectarine. I'm going to use some strawberries, and I'm going to use some nuts to go alongside our oats as well. So again, you can pick and choose whatever you like in your overnight oats. Plums do really well, peaches, apricot. You can layer it up however you like. So you're not going to need anything different to what we've already used to do our rhubarb crunch. This requires no cooking, so it's a good option if you want to make something really quick. And it's a really lovely breakfast item as well, because you can make it the night before and then you can put it in your fridge and then eat it the next morning. So if you're going to have it in a lunchbox, you might want to put it in something like this. So a proper pot so that you can take it to school or to work in. If you're going to make it as something you're going to eat for breakfast, you might want to make it in a little jar or a cup or something that you can keep in the fridge and then just eat. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to chop up our strawberries and our fresh fruit. So we're going to use strawberries and nectarines today. So we are again going to use our claw grip, and we're just going to take the top of our strawberry off, and again we'll put that into our food waste bowl. Then I'm going to use my bridge hold. So remember, this is the one that we use to cut things in half. So we hold it, and then our knife is going to go in between our fingers so it can't cut anything. It can just go down, and then we go down and through the fruit. Okay, so then I'm going to turn it over onto its flat side, and then I'm going to use my claw grip again. Now, because we're going to be layering our ingredients, we want to make sure that we cut nice and fine and thinly. So we don't want big chunks this time. So make sure that you cut them nice and thin. There we go. Okay, so we've got some nice thin slices there. Depending on how many you're making, depends on how much you're going to need really, and how big your pot is. But do remember your portion sizes and try and make sure you're within those. Now, to cut our nectarine or any fruit that's got a stone in the middle, we need to do it in a slightly different way. So we're going to use our bridge hold again, and we're going to put our knife in, and we're going to press down until it hits that stone, which isn't very far. And then we're going to just roll it so that we can cut. So you can see I've gone to where the stalk is now. And so then I'm just going to start the other side of that and then join it up. And then what I should be able to do is just pull it apart. Now, if your fruit's not quite ripe, like this one isn't, then we're just going to do the same again, and we'll do it into quarters. And then that will just make it easier. Equally, if you can't grip it like that, then that's absolutely fine. So now I've got my quarters, I can just peel it away from the stone in the middle, and then I can chop that up in our normal way. So again, I'm just going to do really thin slices of this. This is really good if you've got some leftover bits and pieces from maybe a fruit salad, some of those rainbow dishes that we did before. And again, quantity really does depend upon how many you're making and how big a portion size you're making. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pot, I'm going to get my oats, and I'm going to get my yoghurt, and I'm going to start layering it up. So you're going to need your spoon for this. So I'm going to spoon some oats in to the bottom of my pot, and then I'm going to spoon some yoghurt in. Okay, and then I'm going to layer up my different fruits. So again, if you want to use more than 2 fruits, you can. Entirely up to you. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same again. So I'm going to put some more oats in. Then I'm going to spoon in some yoghurt. And then I'm going to layer it up with some fruit. Okay, now if you were going to do this in a jar, so you can take your jar and you can put your yogurt in. So this is where you could see your different layers, a bit like our rainbow salad that we had before. And then we're going to spoon in some oats. And then we would put our fruit in there. And then repeat the process again. So I'm going to put some yogurt in there. So I'm using fat-free yogurt. So that's making it even healthier for me. I'm going to put some more oats in there. And then I'm going to put some more fruit. Now, if you wanted to add your nuts and things into your layers, then you can add some nuts in there as well. Maybe you don't want to do that every layer, just a couple of layers, or your dry fruit, if you're going to put those on. So I'm just going to finish off with one more layer. I'm going to put my fruit in there, and then put that in the other one. So you can see how different that is. So that filled up quite quickly as opposed to the bigger pot. Just depends on what size pot you're using. And then I'm just going to finish that off with some oats. And then put some oats into this one. Got another slice here. And then on this one, I'm just going to put a little bit of yogurt on the top. And then I'm going to finish that off with a sprinkling of nuts, because I haven't put any nuts in this one. There we go. So there we go. That's our overnight oats. So that's one in a pot ready for your lunchbox. This one here is a layered one. So you can see all the different layers. There we go. You can see the layers there. And then when you come to eat them, mix them all up, and then that will activate all those flavours together. So cover them over, put them in your fridge, and you've got an instant breakfast or an instant snack or something to put in your lunchbox the next day. Thank you for taking part in our first lunchbox session. We hope that you'll join us for our second one, where we'll be making our very own cereal bars and granola bars.